So hello, everybody. I'm Anne Elliott. This is Kraig Elliott.
Welcome, everyone.
We are doing life skills webinars this year for our students and our parents to be able to train up the next generation with lots of practical skills. And
we're excited to be here, to be able to take this time and to hopefully instill in you some skills that you don't know, maybe help improve some things you do know, or maybe you'll teach us something in the long run too.
So definitely use the chat. That's a good reminder. Because we can see the chat, we can, and if we miss something, our daughter will probably let us know. But we want to hear from you. We want your questions and your opinions and thoughts. And that brings me to something very important that we have been meaning to say. And that is that Kraig and I don't have the same opinions about everything.
No.
Especially bread. Especially with anything.
And in the course of our marriage, she started out doing this a lot initially, and then I've kind of taken over lately. And so it's kind of been a joint effort. How you do it. Yeah. And he's like, yes, it is. And yeah, we found out that both of us get good bread. And so that's still can't hear. Let me double check and make sure. Okay. Are we too
maybe
quiet?
We need to be a little less quiet. So, all right. So anyway, I think as they get their sound checked and stuff like that, I wanted to say down in the comments, in the chat, we have put a link to our website where we have posted lots of video. I can't even talk. Lots of recipes and links to other resources that will help you. So if you are can't hear. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna go up. So you can watch these and see the picture.
So sorry for the technical difficulties. We are trying to do this and get it set up.
Some people can hear. So
yeah.
All right.
See if we can figure out why some can hear and some can't. Maybe while she's doing whatever she's doing over there, if you want to, real quick, unmute yourself and say hi, and then mute yourself. We can see how many people say hi.
I don't know if they can.
I don't know if you can or not.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a good idea.
Hi, y'all.
Hi. Yes, you can.
Kind of automatically mutes it, but hi.
Hi there.
We're Amy, and this is Charlotte and Chloe.
Hey.
Hey, y'all.
Hi.
It's good to see you. Hello.
Hello.
Wonder, is Cecile having problems?
Nope, she's good.
She's good.
Hello from Kentucky.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. And
hopefully we fixed it and everything will work out well from here on out.
All right. All right, so today what we're going to go over, we're going to start with simple bread, like what I would call just your basic bread that you make by hand. And the first time I ever made bread, my son was somewhere between around 1 year old. I don't know. I just wanted to do it. I wanted to learn how to do it. And I had this little cookbook. I got it for a wedding present. This is Betty Crocker. And
and by the way, you can see that it's well used in the bread
pages
section.
Are all falling out. Yeah, that's where they're totally falling out. I have to watch. They're all full of splatters and nastiness because of all the times I've been making bread. Oops, yeah, because I'm
pages are falling out.
With it. So this was how I learned to make bread, and I stuck it on the counter, and I learned to do it. Now later we upgraded and got a cool Bosch mixer, grain mill, things like that. But that took time and, saving up money. And we didn't have those things to start out with.
No.
We also, I think I just had a little hand mixer and I just had to knead by hand.
Yeah.
So we wanted to talk a little bit about some of those recipes. Do you want me to do that?
Well, I think you said you were going to start.
That's where I'm going to start. So one of the first recipes I ever made was rolls. And I made them because we were having a family dinner and I wanted something that I could bring to it. And I have a couple things I wanted to show people. So a couple little gadgets. Like this is a gadget. This is just a little dough scraper. And honestly, if you can't find one of these at your local, you know, Walmart or whatever, you could just go to the paint supply section of any store, and it might be a little bigger, which might actually help you. And you can use this, because what happens is your counter gets all gunky. And if you keep adding flour to the counter, you're going to add too much flour to your dough and it gets really hard. So having this, you can scrape your counter, and I just love this thing. This is my absolute favorite tool for making bread.
I've seen some ones more recently that a lot of people are doing that are curved, which makes it easier to scrape the bowl to get the dough out sometimes, so you don't get it all in your hands and stuff.
You're gonna get it on your hands.
I'm kind of a guy who likes to get in with my food and stuff, so that isn't a big deal to me. But some of my kids and stuff are like, ew, and they don't like to do that. So something like that could, if that's your personality, could be a big help.
Now you have a couple tools back here. Can you show them some of yours?
So not that everybody needs all. You do not need these things. These are like over years we've done a little bit here and there, but one is of course a scale, a little kitchen scale, and this is kind of nice sometimes with breads and when you're baking especially. Precision is important, especially for consistency. And my wife is sitting here laughing at me at the moment because she's not this. This is weird because it's almost like the exact opposite of how we normally are.
You don't, it is. It is.
Yeah, she's usually the one who would say scale and measure everything, and I'm the one who's going, I just got to do this.
Well, like with bread, I feel like the temperature outside and the humidity in the air can change things.
Do affect things. So there is a knack over time of getting used to it and seeing like, okay, this is what texture and consistency you want, that you go with a lot. But initially, sometimes it's good to start out, have a base, especially when you're a beginner at bread and things, to measure everything out, and then that gives you an easier chance of having consistency in your baking.
And can I say something? If the very first day that you make bread, pay attention to what the weather is like. So outside today, it's Michigan, and I can see the humidity because it's like foggy everywhere. And so that means that there's a lot of humidity. So pay attention to that. And then if the next time you make bread, it's clear and it's cold, right? So the things take longer to work because they need warmth to work. And so the next time you make bread, it's let's say it's the middle of summer, it's a clear blue sky, hot outside, you got all the windows open. Your bread is going to need less water added. Wait, it would need more water. Anyway, you start to pay attention to the weather outside. I feel like the weather. Or if in the wintertime with your heater on and everything, then nothing open, it gets drier inside. So you might need more water during the winter than in the summer where the humidity is higher. And this is just experience. It just take note. So start with a basic recipe. Or if you live in like Denver, Colorado versus Florida, you know, the humidity factor there and altitude and things like that would change the way you would necessarily put together your bread or how much flour or water to add. And that has definitely affected us because we used to live on the Navajo reservation at a mile up, 6,000 feet up. So we really had to learn that every single place we've lived, it's been a little different. And we lived in Missouri and Florida and Michigan, so you get a lot of variance in the different places we've lived. So I think the key is to forgive yourself and to like touch it and feel it and get to know it. It's like almost alive, and you got to get your hands in it and look at it and smell it and all those things. Can I show them one more thing? Yeah. So I have a Bosch mixer, and my Bosch mixer, I bought this in right around the time we came to Torah. So about 2006, 2006, I think. And I'm not even sure they make them like this anymore. They have different styles. Yeah, it's actually terrible. Newer style. Yeah, but I want to show you something because it's kind of cool. So this inside my Bosch mixer, and we're going to show you some more of this. It has a little, what do you call this? Little thing that comes up the middle. And as my mixer, yeah, I guess so. And this thingamajigger in the middle, as I'm dough hook, as I'm kneading the bread, as this thing is kneading the bread, it starts to clean off the side, and nothing is stuck to it. And that's how I know that I have just the right amount of flour or liquid in it is when if it's sticking to everything, I need to add a little more flour. And if it's got so much flour that's flopping everywhere and it's like there's no stickiness.
A lot of times with ours, if you start seeing it going around and it's knocking the machine all over the place, it typically isn't a good thing, because that means it's probably too dry.
It's too dry.
And
you want to start by adding your liquid, all the liquids first, and then slowly start to add the flour, because it's hard to add more liquid later. You want to start with whatever you've got for liquid. That's what you got, eggs, whatever you've added, but then start adding a little bit of flour till it starts to clean. And if you're doing this by hand, it's the same principle. If it's sticking to your hands, if it's sticking to literally every surface in the kitchen, then you need more flour. And that's why you always want to slowly add things. Sorry, I'm not mechanical. So we have given you guys some recipes. I've given you my a couple different recipes. I have
I was gonna finish with these.
Oh yeah,
quick.
go ahead. Sorry.
So I was, as we're going through the things, I know that most people probably have all these, but I like a spatula, some sort. This one I like because there's a little bit of a scoop to it. My wife does not.
Telling you, we're different.
She likes this one.
Yeah, because it's got a nice
edge only on one side.
I don't know. I like how it feels in my hand. I think that's why
too.
I like it.
And this, I like the wood and stuff like that. And then a good wooden spoon, because this one here, like you can see, it's been beaten up a lot over the years, but this thing will last and it won't break when you're trying to do dough and mix dough and squish it and pull it out of bowls and stuff like that. So that one is really good for that.
And I'm weird enough to think that bread likes wood better than plastic.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it's just a weird thing, but I just think wood goes better with bread.
And then I had some things I was looking up with the sourdough, and they said to use this, but I found in my time of doing it that actually this worked better.
A table knife. Can they
see table knife? I don't know if you can see it.
Just a plain old table knife.
Table knife. And so as you get used to your stuff and you get used to making bread, you will probably come up and go, I like this better than that, and you'll start developing your own personal style of how you like to make bread also.
Mm-hmm. So I have inside my cupboard door, which you're not gonna be able to really see it, but I have a bunch of recipes that are just ingredients. So a lot of them I basically have memorized. Yeah, I have it up here too. I'm giving you guys this in the resources today, and it doesn't have any instructions. It's just ingredients.
Recipes and ingredients.
So there's also a blog post that tells how I do that, but that's just me trying to keep it handy in my kitchen so I don't have to, something I'm making all the time.
All right.
I'm going to turn it over to you for challah.
Okay, is that what we're gonna, did you want to do rolls and talk about rolls at all?
I think let's go to the challah. We'll show everything that way.
All right.
So
we did some challah this last Erev Shabbat, Friday evening, and we took the day and made it. And so we took a little bit of video and some pictures of it that we're going to show. But at the same time, in order to try and show you something, this is that challah that we made, one of the 3 loaves that came out. And unfortunately, we have some mice. They're somewhere between the ages of 13 and 27, and they came in. And even though we ate the 2 others, I tried to fight this one for today, and they still got a hold of it. But that's what happens when you have 7 mice running around and wanting to eat nice, yummy challah. So if you look here, the things like the way we make it, we like to put a little bit of an egg wash on it, and it gives that nice little shine. And that's a really easy thing to do. And then also sometimes we put like sea salt or sesame seeds or everything bagel seasoning or something like that on the top. And it just, something you can do to enjoy a variety of things in your challah. And as you start, getting comfortable with the main recipe, then you can start playing with things and see what you like to do. I've done before where I've added cinnamon and sugar and raisins into it and almost made kind of like a breakfast challah loaf out of it. And I've done other things also. But that's where you get a lot of fun you can have. You can put, parsley or savory herb de Provence or something into it and mix that in and get a little bit more savory. Whatever floats your boat, you can have a lot of fun with your challah and how you want to make it. But so right now we're gonna have, my wife's trying to get up the tip pictures and stuff we took on challah, and you have it. Let's do it. You want to put it up on the so it's fully up on the screen.
I'll set.
All right.
They can see it, but not you.
Well, but it shows the whole picture. Like, hold on. Can you get it so it's just the picture on the slideshow?
I don't know if I know how.
There you go. So, as you can see here, there's these are the ingredients that we use in making our challah. And I accidentally forgot one, which will be on the next slide. But if you look around, this kind of gives you a good idea of everything. And this on the recipe is all there too. But it's kind of nice actually to come and take and put everything out in front of you and have it all, like say I've cracked the eggs, I've melted the butter, done all those things. And it just makes it easy just to pop everything in when and you don't forget anything and you can get the order right and everything. And it's especially important, as you can see, that you have your coffee with you. Oh, you can't see, but I have mine with me, you saw earlier, and in the background there, because that really helps in making the bread better. If you have lots of coffee in you, it makes it great. Sometimes some good music in the background too also helps. Really enjoy making your bread in the kitchen also. So basically, you go through and like Anne said earlier, you put all of your wet ingredients in, and you add a key element of bread making is warm water, warm, clean, pure water, and then your yeast and sugar and salt. Because yeast, sugar, and salt react with each other in certain ways that allow for the bread to rise properly, or to be retarded, the rise to be retarded at a certain time. And so in order to get your yeast activated, the yeast needs warmth and it needs some sort of a sugar to be able to activate itself. A lot of times that's just the flour itself. Sometimes you add sugar in order to be able to get that to activate quicker. In this instance, we put sugar in, so challah has a little bit of sweetness to it, and on its own. And then the salt actually retards the rise in your bread, so it helps in kind of calming the yeast during the process. So what we like to do is in our mixer to put all those ingredients together, and we sit there and you can see there's the yeast and then the sugar and the salt and the warm water. And we put all these together in there and give it a little bit of a stir just to get that yeast mixed in a little bit and getting that to start activating right away. And then the butter there is also there because it's warm and it gets it, some more, keeps the warmth going. Now here in Michigan, it was about 25 degrees last Friday, and our mixer bowl was cold. And so I put a little bit hotter than tap water in, because as soon as it hits that bowl, it's immediately going to cool down that water, and it may not be hot enough to really get a good activation of that yeast. So what I've found in my baking experience is heat is a necessity in baking bread. And in the wintertime, sometimes that's difficult and you have to find artificial means, or whether it's you're heating your house or putting it under lights or on top of the stove with the oven on, different things like that in order to try and get everything to activate properly. If you live in somewhere in the South and it's hot all year round, or in the summer and you have your heat going, man, that stuff you'll be over activating your yeast and it will want to just grow like crazy on you. So you have to be sometimes less on your rise time, because it might over rise on you, so to speak. So you put all these together, you mix them, go ahead, and then there's the tablespoon of salt I forgot to put out on the counter. So we're adding that in there now. And you get all that stuff going on in it, and you can see in there it looks good. Now I'm adding the eggs. And with us, what I'll do is I'll end up adding pretty much everything. I'll go ahead and mix those up. I didn't do that in the actual thing because I wanted you to see the 3 eggs, but I'll mix those up before I actually stick them in the mixer too, so they're already kind of broken down a little bit. Go ahead, get going, hon. You can. Oh, yeah, there you go. You can get the idea of mixing it. So then all that goes in, and then I start putting a little bit of the flour in, and I mixed a little bit of the flour. And then for this loaf here, I put some levain in, or some sourdough starter, just to add a little bit of flavor in this instance to it. This is the the word I'm trying to remember, where I had to take some out. What is that called? Sorry, the discard. Excuse me. I had this was from my discard from the sourdough starter I was making, so I just added a little bit of that in just to try and give it a little extra flavor. Didn't have to do it, but that's something in this instance I was wanting to do and try out. It's actually, I think, one of the first times I've done it, so it was a total experiment. So then we put that in and mix that in, and you can see it's pretty runny still. And here I'm just continuing to add the flour some at a time, and just kind of looking at the consistency of it as it goes through and is being blended in. And as you do this, for us being colder here, I probably will end up using a little bit less than all the flour I have in there. So I did it's always good. I like to do about half the flour and let it be mixing, and then add keep adding some more out of the second half, and leave about, a half a cup below what it says to do to get to see what it's going to look like. And then with that last half cup, just add a little bit at a time until I see what the right mixture is. If I get all of that in and it's still sitting there and is sticking everywhere and it seems really sticky, I might go get even a little bit more and put it in. But this time it was actually pretty dry. So as you can see, I haven't finished putting all the flour in, and it's already not sticking anywhere. And I always thought I put maybe too much flour in, so I stopped putting the rest of the flour in. And I think I had about a quarter cup left from what the measurements say to do. Yep. So then once you get your ball, it should be nice and warm now. And I think it was 8 minutes is what we let our mixer go at mixing it on the second setting, level 2. Don't need to usually go to ours has a 1, a 2, and a 3, and 3 is very fast. And typically you don't need to do that. And then what I like to do, and this is one thing where I'm different from my wife, she would just leave it in there and in the bowl and just let it go. I don't like that, because then when it rises all around the center part on ours and the dough hook, and you have to sit there and scrape all that off. So I like to put a little olive oil in the bottom of another bowl and form it into a ball and stick that in there, kind of rub it around a little bit to get the oil all over it, and let it rise in a different bowl. So that's just the difference between us two and how we like to do the bread. And then you cover it, and I found these nice, awesome cloth covers on Amazon that are great to use instead of plastic wrap, and do just as good a job at keeping it from getting dried out and still allowing it to breathe and everything. So if you ever want to do those I've found those to be awesome. A little thing I found online and think they're great. But and there's a cat. So you have to have a cat in every video that you're making. So there's our proverbial cat picture. But so here I am reforming it. Actually, this is now my daughter. This is my wife. So the Anne's taking over now because I had to go run an errand. So she's taking over, and she's forming it into the actual challah. And you see there, she's using her her dough scraper.
It makes 3 loaves.
So this recipe does make 3 loaves. So that's why she's splitting it into 3. And then from there, to make the braids, she'll split it into 3 more. After a while, after a while, if you get really coordinated, you can start playing with more braids, cutting it into more pieces. But we typically tend to do a 3 loaf one. And that could also make it why sometimes you see them, at a store or something, and they look different than what you do at home. Most of the time, that's because of the amount of braids they're wanting to use in it.
I wanted to say something. You can see I'm cutting off little pieces and adding them to other ones. This is where Kraig would weigh each of them to make them exactly equal. And I'm like, no, it's Friday afternoon and it's almost Sabbath and I don't have time for that weighing business. So I just kind of weigh them in my hand. And granted, his probably are prettier than mine. I will just say that. That's true. But I'm in a hurry. So I'm just weighing them with my hands going, that one needs a little more than the other. I just wanted to add that.
Okay.
So now we're rolling them each one out.
So you can kind of see it, just rolling, taking each of the pieces you made, rolling each one out. And then after a few minutes, so you do that.
Well, can I say something?
Yeah.
Right here, when you're rolling them with your hands, the gluten in the dough, you can feel it's kind of tight. And then as it rests for a second on the counter, it loosens back up again and you can roll it more. Yeah. So I found that I roll each one, start turning it into a log and then come back to them a few times because they just keep loosening. It's alive. And it's like, I don't want to get stretched. Don't make me. And then it kind of gets used to it. And then, okay, you can stretch me some more. So that's kind of what I'm doing there is it takes maybe this is where I take a little longer, but you can just feel it underneath your hand getting looser.
So it's like, for instance, when if you ever make a pizza and you make homemade pizza dough and you get your dough and you squish it out a little bit and then you start to form it. And as you're forming it, you go and you push it out. And as soon as you go to the next section, it all squishes back in on itself and pulls back in. That's because that the elasticity of the gluten is saying, no, I don't want to go where you want me to go. So that's why you do it a little bit and then you let it side aside for 5 or 10 minutes and you come back and do it again. And usually by the second or third time, you can get that one dough ball to stretch all the way out to your pizza pan. Mm-hmm. Same thing with the challah here. As you can see, as she lets it rest, it allows it to want to be able to stretch out more the way you want it. Now, when I roll, I like to start in the beginning, in the middle, and you roll from the center and you roll your hands out. You can see you're doing it there. And as you do this, you'll get better as you go, but try and work really hard at getting the middle to the level or the size you want it, and then going out, because if you don't, you'll get like big spots in certain areas and smaller spots in certain areas. And if you don't want that and you want a more cohesive one, try and do it. And another thing is once you get it rolled out, it's very hard to get it to want to do anything else but the shape you have it in when you roll it out, because it tends to get to a certain point and then the elasticity of the gluten doesn't want to work anymore.
Can you see how the countertop right there is really greasy? I have not added flour to my countertop. I prefer oil myself. Now, what do you think, Kraig?
I like in this instance oil over flour also. I just don't like cleaning up a lot of flour on my counters, and that's just a personality thing.
It kind of makes it dry too.
Yeah.
I feel like if you add more flour at this point, that flour hasn't sat for that. Did we tell them this had a rise time here between? We had it rise in that bowl for what?
And I think I did that. We'll have that in the pictures.
Yeah, and the recipe has
so
it too.
In the bowl, when we put it in the bowl initially, you let it rise for an hour and a half, 2 hours until it doubles in size. That's typically with bread, a double in size concept is what you're looking for. So the original dough ball you put in, you want it about double in size. And then if you are, whatever you're doing to work with it, you punch it down, you pull it out and you form it into a ball again, and you cut it into the shape you want it. And then what you'll do is after you do that, like in this instance, after she braids the bread, you'll let it rise again before actually putting it in the oven. And
so you can see here, you're just kind of fiddling with it, trying to make it pretty. I'm not the best braider. I never have been great with hair or braids. So this is about as good as you're going to get from me. But you can just tuck, it's really forgiving. You can tuck it in. And you can see like all the different lumps and stuff. You can, like, there's some ugly parts. You can hide them really well when you start to braid.
And as you do this, you'll oftentimes become a lot better at it and more skilled at your braids.
My daughters are better at it than I am.
And Anne hasn't done a whole lot in a long time, so she's a bit out of practice. Because we have one of our younger daughters who's the one who's been doing it most of the time. Younger,
she's 15.
Yeah,
so she's good at it.
She's gotten to be a lot better at it over time.
So yeah, okay. Do you want me to keep going to the next one?
I think you get the idea of how to do the challah and the braiding. So
okay. Rises for about a half hour.
Yeah, rises for about another half hour, 45 minutes. Again, you want it to get, start to get another rise, a good rise, and see it puffing up. And then these pictures here are showing how to do an egg wash. And I've seen a lot. I actually read an article of a woman and her daughter who went through all the different types of possible egg washes. And their view was a mix of egg yolks and a little bit of cream made the best shine. But we just like to scramble up an egg.
Well, we're busy at this point in the afternoon. It's almost Sabbath. You can see this is my daughter's hands, but she's hurrying because we are racing the clock before sunset. So we are trying our best. We know we still have to let it rise again, and then we still have to get it baked, and we still have to get chicken in the oven. And so I think if it's challah, we're like, get it done. Where maybe if it's on another day of the week, we might experiment with some
take a little bit more time with it. So on this though, one thing I would say is important that, again, my wife who's like, get it done, and I who kind of want a little bit nicer, is really making sure that you get the egg mixed up and not let sometimes the egg white and the yolk aren't mixed properly. And if you do that, it doesn't always get a nice sheen on the bread. But if you just make sure it's really good and mixed when you do that. And then don't go crazy and heavy on the egg wash. You just want to do it a light egg wash, because all it's doing is just getting a nice sheen. And also, the other good thing about an egg wash is if you want to put anything on as a topping, like sesame seeds or oats or sea salt or everything bagel seasoning, it's what allows it to stick to the top of the bread.
Yeah. I think the only other thing I would say is, how do you know when it's risen enough? And it's just so fat and happy, and it smells good. I know that's not very scientific, but it's puffy, and you can poke at it, and it kind of
So here, when we do to this point, once we get done with the braiding and get it actually onto the tray, this is the time we usually start preheating our oven.
Oh yeah.
And then we'll stick the tray on top of the oven, and especially in the winter right now, like it is, and how it's cool and they're in the house. This allows for it to rise because the heat from inside the oven kind of permeates throughout the whole stove. And a lot of times you have a vent somewhere in your stove that comes up through the top. And so that heat from the oven starts to evacuate a little bit and keeps the bread warm and helps with the rising process.
So last Friday night, we completely forgot to take a picture of it after it came out of the oven. Like I said, it was Sabbath, and we were just not thinking about this. So later that night, I'm like, oh no, we only had one of the 3 loaves left. And this is, and Kraig, don't you still have it? I can.
Well, that's the last loaf, but unfortunately, as you can see there, it's full. And now the kids got to it again, and then started to finish it off before we caught them. Said, no, we need that loaf.
Now we have some differences of opinions in our house about how long to bake the bread. I like to bake mine like 35, 40 minutes, and maybe a little bit more golden than that. I think my daughter likes it a little doughier, and this was 30 minutes. Oh, and Kraig, you too?
No, I like it more like you.
Yeah. So you can play with that, but when you to know if it's done, you can kind of pick it up off and again, I use my dough scraper, but just so I don't burn my hands, but get it off of the loaf and feel it, and kind of maybe knock the bottom of it and see if it's got a good, sound. It should like sound a little hollow, like you're hitting a door. But I think if I had knocked this loaf, it would have been a little mushier on the bottom, but that's how some of them like it. Yeah. And fresh out of the oven with butter is divine. So
probably a lot of you, or some of you maybe have watched, if you've ever watched the British baking show, you probably know who Paul Hollywood is. And we went through the whole first couple seasons with that and watched it and enjoyed learning a lot about bread from him. But the reality is that sometimes I would see what he did, and here's this professional baker, world-renowned and stuff, and I go, well, I don't like my bread, or I don't like my cookies, or I don't like my cake like he likes them. And so when I make them, I'm going to make them a little bit different because that's how I want it. You may do this and go, I like mine extra brown and extra crispy. So cook it a little bit longer if that's the way you want it, But like our kids, we start out with less. And that's another really important thing is when you're cooking, especially baking, ovens and stuff differ. So you get a recipe that says, do it for 30 minutes at 350 degrees. And you do that and you look in and someone says, oh, that's doughy still. And then the next person in their oven does it and it's already browned all the way. Ours is just right. So you always do less. I've learned over time to do less time, and then I can always add more. I've never been able yet to be able to do it too long and get it to go back. So as we learn, so if it says do for 30 minutes at 20, I'll do it for 22 just to be sure, and just check it. Go, let's do another 5, and then I'll do another 5, and then at 27 minutes I'll check it again. Go, okay, this needs another 3 minutes. Put it on for the rest of the 3 minutes and see, and then maybe that needs 2 more minutes, and just kind of do it that way. So you get a nice, consistent loaf the way you like it for you and your family.
Expedition.
All right, so that brings us to our next type of bread, and this is an artisan no-knead expedition bread. All right, and it's a no-knead bread, but typically no-knead breads they take a very, very short amount of time to prepare, but they take a very long time to get ready to bake and then to bake. So usually a 24-hour period is what the typical is. This, because it's no-knead expedition bread, it's expediting the process, and it takes you from start to finish a little over 2 hours, and you can have bread anytime you want it. Fresh, homemade, awesome, artisanal looking bread.
Which that's good for homeschool families.
So this is a example of that bread that we just made. And as you can hear, it's got a nice, good texture to it. It sounds nice and done. And it's a nice, good artisan bread. And it's a day or two old, but you can see there, you can see lots of good rising and good space in there. Good yeast making it nice and yummy. And you could just sit there and this smells so good. And I did the same thing on this one. I don't normally do this, but I wanted to experiment. And I added some of my sourdough cast off into this card just to see what it would do when I actually ate it. But it smells divine. But the awesome thing about this is, again, a little over 2 hours and you can have bread. And it's so easy. So basically what you need to do with this one, is it's 4 ingredients. And that's it. 4 ingredients. Yeast, salt, water, and flour. That's it. And again, this is another bread where you can do a variety of things. Just take the basics of the ingredients and the basics of the instructions. And once you get used to them, you can play with them whatever you want. Like I added sourdough starter. You can add nuts, and you can add dried fruit or anything like that you want to, or seasonings and herbs to do whatever you want with this to make it an enjoyable bread for you. But basically you take and you put in, you want to make sure that you, again, the key to this is warmth for the yeast to rise. You need that warmth. And so with this one, you some ideas on what you need to do, some good notes to do. And it says this in the recipe that we provided, the link to, is make sure your bowl is warm. So if you need to, like, stick your bowl in in the microwave if you have that for a minute or something, just to get it warm. Or you can take really hot water from your tap or something, or boil some water and put a little bit of it in the bowl to get it hot or warmed up. And then make sure your water is warm also. And you put the water in, and then you add your salts and your yeast and your flour, and you just mix it all in there. And you just take your spoon and you just stir it a little bit in there with your spoon until all that stuff combines, and it creates like a shaggy texture. Shaggy is a great term that's used in baking, but sometimes maybe you don't know what that means. But as you mix it, the flour on the outside is still trying to get in there, and it leaves these kind of like flopping little bits of dough where the flour is kind of mixed in between and stuff. And that's the kind of, it looks like a shaggy hairdo. If you could imagine a thick-headed boy's hairdo and it's all kind of shaggy, that's kind of the consistency of what it would look like. And at that point in time, and that takes 5 minutes to get all those ingredients and combine them all. It's about.
Do you mix it for 5 minutes?
No, you do not mix it for 5 minutes. You mix it until that shaggy consistency happens, and it's pretty much almost all combined in there, and then that's it. Now the next step is important, and that's the rest time. So from this point on, you're gonna just cover it. And as you can see there, I have my oven on because that's gonna be my thing that keeps it warm. And then you're gonna sit there and let it prove or rise for an hour and a half. And that's gonna get it to grow, and it's gonna expand again. It's like double what it's supposed to do. To get to that point where you're allowing that yeast to really activate. Nope. That's all we have. We missed the next one. So once that's done and you got that double size, then you're gonna take a cast iron skillet. We have 3 different sizes. I don't know if you wanna, did I show it in the cast iron? Oh, this. So this is, for us, we have 3 different sizes. I don't know if you can click it on so you can see me flip over. So this is a small one. So this is like just for like personal use. And this is our medium sized one. And then we have a large size skillet. And you see the difference in size. This is the one that you want. I think it's like a 10-inch, 9-inch, 10-inch skillet. And this one is what you will want for this size bread. So basically with that, you just take the bread and you put that you have, and once it's risen an hour and a half, you put some oil around it and kind of coat it in the oil. And then this is a time if you want to like put sesame seeds on it, or you want to put some rolled oats in there or something like that, you can throw that in there and just kind of roll it around in it. And then you just form it up into a ball and set it in your cast iron skillet. Put your oven rack, make sure your oven rack's in the middle of your oven, and it's set on 400 degrees, and then you cook it for another 40 minutes.
You could score it.
You can score it if you would like to do that. Feel free. A lot of times with that shaggy texture, when it expands out, it does a lot of that kind of little bit of a crack and things also. So it doesn't, you don't have to do it. But it's really hard to mess this bread up. And that's the awesome thing about it. So not only is it quick, but as you can see, it's not that, it's pretty easy to do, and anybody pretty much can do it. And then you can mess around with it. Now, if you want to go to a typical artisanal, bread that's like this, a lot of them, what you do is you take and you let it rise, and then you let it rise overnight. And then you cook it in a Dutch oven, and it has a lid on it. This one, you don't have to do any of that. This was just simply 2 hours of rising and 40 minutes in the oven. Pulled it out of the oven, and it was ready to go. And you can just slap some butter on it and enjoy some fresh bread anytime you want. So that's the artisanal no-knead expedition bread. So it's really fast to do. That brings us to our sourdough segment. And with that, I want to talk a little bit about sourdough starter. And some of you may know more than I do. I've done this a few times. I'm still getting used to it and learning the ins and outs of sourdough. It's both easy and complicated. It's really easy to do. Sometimes it doesn't work as well as you want it, depending on what's going on in your house and the time of year and stuff. But it's really not that difficult to do. I actually have watched a couple videos where people overcomplicate it. And as I was doing this process again, I was reminding myself how to simplify it back down. So key things you need to know. Number one, you need some good, fresh, clean water. I used our tap water, which is city water, which is not what you want. But I went and I boiled it for quite a while to boil out the chlorine and things like that, so that can prevent the yeast or the natural yeast from being able to grow and develop in the actual starter. If you are on city water, I would highly recommend going and getting like some store water that's been distilled and doesn't have any other things, or if you have your own purification system of some sort, I would highly recommend doing that. So you take that fresh water, and again, you want it to be, you just take that, and here's my scale going into play. And it says on there to measure out your jar, because you want to kind of know your jar weight. And then from there, you know to subtract that from how much you're putting in. To simplify it down, and my wife laughed at me when I was telling her this. She says, "What are you doing? That is way too complicated." And after the time of doing it, I could say it probably is too complicated. This is what you need. 1 part water to 1 part flour. That's it. And I would say, and it doesn't say this here, but I would say like go with like 100 grams of flour and 100 grams of water to start with.
And in his wife's words, that would be like a half a cup of flour, half a cup of water, like
Yep.
just about the same amount. You don't even have to measure it. If you just grab a cup out of the cupboard and, a coffee cup of flour, a coffee cup of water,
Yep.
Doesn't have to be anything fancy.
The core idea is pretty much 1 part water to 1 part flour.
What about the rye?
Oh, that is a little bit different thing here. So when you are starting your sourdough starter and doing some research and stuff with some different places, it seemed that sometimes if you're just using regular flour, it is a little bit harder to get it to work. And so what many suggested, and what historically we found as a lot of people use, is you start with a rye flour. And we were trying to research it and why. My guess is that maybe rye flour and rye itself has more natural yeast that are found on the grain than your wheat would, and so that allows for the yeast to be able to activate quicker and to activate your starter better.
Mm-hmm. Can I add, if you can't find any rye flour, or if it looks like your grocery store's rye flour has been there for too many decades and it's long since past its prime, you could just add a little pinch of yeast, like store-bought yeast, to it instead. So just wanted to add that. It's maybe not quite as authentic, but it will work, and that helps.
Another thing is the closer it is to being from the actual berry to being in your starter. So what I mean by that is if you have, like, for instance, if you've gone to the point where you have your own grain mill or something and you're buying wheat berries or rye berries and you're putting that in and grinding it yourself, the closer you can get to that process, the better it is going to be to start your starter, because the closer it is to that being in those natural state, the more natural yeast you're going to get into your starter. The longer it's been, and the more from when it's been processed and ground into your starter, the less likely you're going to have much active yeast in your flour. And so that is the one negative of getting store-bought sometimes. And the better quality, like organic flours and stuff like that, you get free. Even if you get it just for your starter, sometimes you have to decide, when you're going to do the best and good, better, best, so to speak. And this, where your starter, to get it going, you might want your best. And then later on, you can feed it with not as good of quality or not organic versus organic. One other thing I want to make sure to mention is you cannot use bleached flour. Do not use bleached flour. Make sure you're getting, and I would suggest this for all your baking needs, only use unbleached flour, because the bleach is going to counteract anything natural that's going on in your bread making process and make it that much more difficult. And the reason you say that is because for whatever weird reason, the more processed something is, the cheaper it is. And so everybody tends to go for the cheapest thing, which is the bleached flour. Unbleached is a little bit more expensive, but it's a lot better for you and a lot better to bake bread with. So here what I'm doing is just simply taking the time to really mix and make sure that you're getting all of that flour coated and saturated with that water. You don't want to leave flour bits, if at all possible, in there. You want to really get it coated and get it nice and even in its texture throughout the starter at this point in time.
Next picture.
Yeah.
Sorry. All right.
And by the way, keep the comments going. I love the comments and seeing them pop up in here to kind of help direct, where I'm going, or try to answer some questions as they come up. So I appreciate that. So here you can see there, I put a tag on if you want to do, if you're really like me and want to, be really precise and scientific about it, then you take all those measurements you did for the weight of your jar and how much you put in of each of the flour and the water, and you put that in a little sticky note and stick it on the end of your jar and the date. It's really important for this initial to start up that you put the date in, I think. That way you know how many days it's been that your starter's been going. And then all you do after that is you just simply put a little loose fitting lid of some sort on it and stick it in a warm place. And
that's the top.
And on ours, that's the top of our fridge, as we're trying to grab any of the warmth that's on the top of the fridge from it working, to try and keep that starter as warm as it possibly can. Unfortunately, our fridge is one of the cooler rooms in our house, unless we have the oven going. And so ours is a little bit difficult. We're having a little bit of a struggle getting it to really get going. And it's going to take longer. Typically, they say about 5 to 7 days, a good 7 days to get your starter going. But that's just the baseline. Depending on where you live, temperature, humidity, amount of yeast in the air, et cetera, it can take longer or not. This is the picture after day 1. And as you can see there, you can start seeing the little bubbles in the top of it that are there. And that's the yeast starting to work and starting to grow and develop into your starter. And that was just after day 1. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say an old wives' tale. I don't know if it's scientifically true, but I think about this every time we make sourdough, is that if you have a lot of fighting and arguing in your kitchen, your sourdough starter will be sad and it will not grow as well. So I don't know if that's true, but I do think about it. I'm like, don't fight, no fighting.
So if you're one of those people that likes to talk to your plants because you feel it needs to grow, the similar idea with your sourdough starter. It's a living organism, so you want to treat it kindly, speak nice thoughts and nice words around it to your family.
Your children grow better that way too.
Yes. So you can put it on it. This is your kindness sourdough. So you carry it around so everybody when it's around the sourdough has to make sure that they're being nice to each other.
Oh, dear. Is that all I have for I think the rest is what you show in person.
Yes. So my wife's going to go from the pictures of the past to wherever my starter is at the moment. Oh, there we go. Yes. So as you can see here, this is our sourdough starter at the moment. And this is day 5 or 6, I think it is. I'm trying to see here. You can see it's kind of, it's swelling a little bit. Now, unfortunately, it was not growing super well because I think our kitchen is overall too cold. And I've been trying to figure out different ways to get it warm.
Smells really good.
Yeah, the smell is there. And every time I take some of the discard out, I know it's getting there because it's this discards night has that nice sour smell from anything that's been fermented. And so I know it's working, but it's just being slow. So I did what she told you a little bit earlier and added a little bit of yeast, just a pinch, maybe a quarter of a teaspoon, and mixed it around just to try and get it going. And then I also was trying something. Again, this is trial and error. So I got some warm water and stuck it in here and then was putting the jar in there just to see if that would help with the kind of develop a little activation. I think it is actually working pretty well at the moment with that.
I have a theory, and the theory I have is that, you know how the Torah says we're supposed to throw out our sourdough starter once a year, and which is somewhat frustrating when you used to make sourdough before Torah and you're like, oh, I have to start over. But it is so much easier to grow a good starter in the warm springtime than it is in the middle of winter right now. And so I wonder if that's the idea. And if we had a really strong starter going on, by the time you get to January the next year, you wouldn't have maybe so much trouble as what we're having.
Probably not the best to start in January.
No.
Because it is, at least in Michigan, because it's a little bit colder if you live in the north. Other people that are down in the south, and if you still have the warm temperatures and stuff, it's probably, you don't even notice the difference. But we're struggling. I'm struggling to get it to go.
Yeah.
But that's not a big deal. Just this is where bread is, because it's a living organism. It doesn't always work by way we want it to work. Yeah. There's probably a good biblical principle in that, but we'll go on from there.
Can I ask you a couple questions?
So hold on one second.
Okay.
So what I was going to say is, while it says it'd be ready in about 7 days, depending on your conditions, it might take 8 to 10 days to get it to really activate. And you want to make sure it's good and activated before you start using it. I mean, as far as for making bread, the discard you can do to throw in and just have fun with here and there.
What is a discard?
So the discard is what I'm going to show you right now, actually. And that's simply where you can see I'm just going to take some of this off. I'm just going to take some out and I'm going to put it into a jar. I have a little container I put in the fridge. My wife's going to get it out of our fridge real quick. Top shelf, I think. Right there, right in front of you. The blue lid. I forgot to get this one out. Blue lid right in front of you. The glass. There you go. So this is the discard jar. You can show it to them.
Yeah, it's.
You can see that's the last couple days discard.
It doesn't look as alive as that now because it's been cold.
And I'll just take some of this out of here, because if I keep feeding this, which I'm going to do and need to do, I'm gonna have this massive jar of sourdough. You don't need that, which is going to bring us to the next statement. So I'm just going to take out 100 grams, or you can say, a quarter to a third of a cup of sourdough, because that's what I'm going to put back in to feed it for today. So whatever I'm putting in, I want to take that much out so that I don't end up with like a half gallon of sourdough starter. You don't need that. You just need a little bit. And a lot of people I've seen, mostly they have like at most a pint jar of sourdough starter. So you don't need a whole lot unless you're baking. Like if you're baking a ton, then the more you're baking with it, the more you need. If you're only making like say a loaf a day or every other day or something like that, you probably need a pint. And if you're making like 1 or 2 a week, then that leads us to the next thing, which this is something that we picked up from watching other people. I think my wife mentioned it. And that is, how do you keep your sourdough going? Because sourdough is a living organism, and just like your children, if you don't keep feeding them every day, they're not going to grow. And so the same thing is with your sourdough starter. You have to keep feeding it. And so like a lot of times you just put a little bit of that in, and you're like, wow, that's a lot of flour I'm putting in, and then discarding it. Now the discard, you can use on all sorts of things.
Anything else.
Yeah. You put it into any type of bread you want.
Biscuits, banana bread, whatever you're making.
Because that's actually what you're going to pull out, the discard, to actually make your sourdough bread. The discard they call it that because you're pulling out of your starter. You're not going to use your starter.
No, you're keeping your starter for the actual nice loaf that you're making, but this is going to be what you use for all your other baking, like your challah. So you keep this for Friday afternoon. Well, I would like say Thursday evening. You could pull this out, get it alive again by Friday.
True. Yeah.
I mean, it would just depend on, like, this is going to be so cold. It's been in the fridge. It's not been fed every day like the other. So this isn't going to have as much potency as your, is that a word?
Yeah.
As that,
well,
as
it's not as
starter.
alive.
No.
So what's happening is when you stick it in the fridge, obviously, like most things, you're stopping the process from happening as much.
But you don't want to waste it.
Yeah.
So
Because it's good. It's
yeah.
good stuff. So so we tend to like I was saying, I added it to my challah. I've added it to my quick breads, things like this. Now, when you're quick breads, it's not going to do much. It's just a little bit of flavor addition. It's not going to do a whole lot towards your rising and things like that because it is stagnant and it takes time to reactivate. So going back to the starter though, if you're like, say you need to go on a vacation and you're going to be gone from your house for a week for Sukkot, then what do you do? Because you got to, if you leave your sourdough out on the counter and no one's there to feed it, and you go on Sukkot for your week, you could actually kill your starter. And no one wants to do that after all they've done to keep it. So a lot of people will say, well, you have to keep feeding it or find someone to come in and feed it or things like that, but that's very difficult. Well, we actually saw a lady that explained this, and she got this from her grandmother, who got it from her grandmother, her mother, et cetera, et cetera. And then when we were listening to it, my wife was reminded of Laura Ingalls Wilder, Little House on the Prairie books, and remembered something that Carolyn Ingalls did in the books also that matched what this lady said. And what she did is to keep your starter when you're going to be gone, you add flour to it. You keep mixing it. You add flour till it's like dry, and it's like pretty much like a pretty thick, solid mass. And then you put a little bit of extra flour on top. So when you like close your jar, you're gonna open your jar, you're just gonna see flour on the top. Then you put a lid on it and you stick it in your fridge. And when you do that, your starter will be fine. And then when you're ready to use it again, you pull it back out, and if you want it like the next day, you need to at least pull it out 24 hours ahead of when you're going to do your next loaf. And you just add some more water to it, stir it around again, just like you would any other time. Get that so that it's back to that consistency you need, and then wait 24 hours to make your bread, and it should be good to go again. So there's a helpful hint that we found out by looking around and seeing some different things.
I know our time is going long, but I wanted to make sure we covered a couple things really fast. First of all, when we're talking bread, we have a couple goals in our family. Like sometimes the goal is just to put food on the table and it to be better than what we could buy at the store, and not as processed. We know where all the ingredients came from, and so in that purpose, it's better. It's definitely better than anything you can buy at the store. Except I will say, I'll come back to that in a second. There is a couple exceptions at the store, but anyway, for really busy times, we just need to know some exceptions. But then there is the best bread that is more like what I think the Bible is talking about.
So the good, better, best.
Yes.
The good, better, best principle. We have a good, better, best principle. So we try to do the best in everything. But when you don't have the time or you don't have the money or something like that, then sometimes you go for good or better instead of best. And you want to try and have as much of it in the best.
Yeah.
But sometimes you go with good instead of better or best in order to make it so you can make it.
Right. So grain has some problems. There's some things that it can hurt you. And a lot of people have to stay away from grains because of these issues. And so I've been researching this for quite a few years to try to get around those problems. I keep thinking to myself, the Father created grain and he talks about bread. He's the bread of life. How can this be a problem? And so these are the questions that I'm asking myself. And I found through time, and I'm going to give you, because there's no way we can cover all of this quickly. This book, I do not agree with every single thing in this book, because this book, the author is not Torah observant. It's called Nourishing Traditions, and I have a link to it on the resource page. But one of the things I like about it is she talks about bread, and I'm just going to try to simplify this down. But when a bird, okay, grain and wheat is a seed, and I don't have one in here with me right now, but it's when a bird comes and eats a seed, if that seed sprouts inside the bird's stomach, that bird could explode up in the air. And this is how I explain it to my kids. It's not quite like that.
Like the rice principle. Like
yes,
when they
yes.
throw rice
At a wedding or something,
and
it
they
hurts the
eat
birds.
the rice, and then they drink and expand and kill the bird.
So the Father, when he created the world, so amazingly put inside of all seeds, it doesn't even have to be wheat, but any seed, he put what's called an enzyme inhibitor, and it keeps that seed from sprouting. And unfortunately, those enzyme inhibitors, if we quickly process our bread, if we quickly grind it, quickly, make banana bread and cookies and all of that, then we still have those enzyme inhibitors, and we can't digest it either. So you can't get to the good nutrients that are in bread. So one of the things that you want to do is make slow bread, because when you get it wet, it neutralizes the enzymes or enzyme inhibitors so that the enzymes can come out and do their job.
Wet and time.
Because
you can't just take a wheat berry and grind it up.
I think 16 hours
and have it not have these inhibitors. They'll still be in there. They're still in the grind of the wheat. So in order to get the wheat berries for these inhibitors to be broken down so your body can digest it properly, it needs time and water and and to be able to
all the things it would have in the ground if it were sprouting.
Yes.
So a lot of the bread that we've shown you already today is quick bread, even if it's 4 or 5 hours. What you really want to get to is the point where you're thinking ahead, and you're starting your bread the day before, 2 days before, and you're slowly getting to that process. And the bread is just going to be, the flavor is going to be much better. I think the Father knew what he was doing, of course, but it's also going to be so much more easier for you to digest. Now, another option is you can soak your flour, and you can also sprout the grain, which I don't think we're going to have time to get to today. So we did put links in the resources to that. Yeah. Maybe another time we could show the sprouted, because sprouted flour, you sprout it, then you grind it. Sprout it, then you dry it, then you grind it, and then it can become like a quick flour. So it's amazing in cookies and amazing in banana bread and amazing in all the things you normally do quick. And it has a malty, delicious flavor.
Adds a little souriness to it, that sourdoughyness.
It's like malted milk balls.
Yes, if you like malted milk or those kind of things,
that's what
it
malt
adds
is.
a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Yes, malt is sprouted barley typically.
So, yummy, very delicious. So it's worth learning, and it's easy. The problem for a homeschool mom on some of these easy things is they're time consuming, and not time like your time, but you have to plan ahead. And we have a lot on our plates, and we have a lot we're already planning, and sometimes you forget about them, and you're like, oh man, I was gonna make cookies today, but I totally forgot to do that, so I guess we're not having cookies. So, or you just go buy Oreos, which that defeats the whole purpose, so don't do that.
Go without cookies for a day.
Well, it's a lot to try to teach, but I have put a lot of links and recipes and even articles to explain the science behind it. Which one?
This one.
Yeah.
So some other favorite books of ours that we wanted to bring out. Number one, Breadwise. Is this one, Bread Alone.
Yeah. I think it's old now. I was looking on Amazon today, and I could find it, but it's kind of old. But I like it because it goes through from easy breads and quick breads all the way up to the levain and the sourdoughs and the fancy French breads and croissants. I mean, if you really love bread, which I do, that's a great book to have. And
then here's this one, which was done by my lovely wife here. And as she was talking about all that research and stuff that she's done, this is what it's gone into. And as you can see, it's a pretty thick book. And the point of this book is for women who are exhausted, too tired, worn out, have
chronic health
problems, things like this. It goes into a lot of details of the research that she dug up when she wasn't feeling good and having lots of chronic health issues.
Yeah, because when you don't feel good, that's when you need to make good bread, but you don't feel good, so you don't make good bread. And so we were wanting to put a lot of ideas. Now, having said that, honey, we're going to have a webinar in about a week and a half. It's, what's the date? I have it written on my fridge, January 22nd at noon. And we're going to tackle a lot more of that. So if you're interested in that, that's something to put on your calendar. So January 22nd at noon. And of course, we'll have a replay. But I feel like we're missing
And you can find that book on foundationspress.com.
Yeah.
which is our main website, main company that we have. And and that's where we got the good, better, best principle from too, because she was sick and didn't have any energy to want to make bread, but knew we needed to make better bread than what we had. And so we started out initially trying to find the best bread we could maybe buy and afford, and buy that until she had a little bit better health and a little bit more energy, and then we'd make a little bit better bread. And so you're constantly balancing that time and health.
It's like ability. The dough. It's like the dough for challah. When you're rolling it out, and it has a lot of tenseness and tightness. There's a lot of resistance. There's a lot of problems and reasons why you cannot make good bread. But you let it rest a little while and you get it that far. And then you come back to it and you try again. So like, it's a good principle with life is when things are really difficult, just give it a little effort and then come back to it. Give it a little more. You don't feel like you have to learn all of this in one day. You definitely don't. Kraig, I'm going to get the bread out of the cupboard and show them if they need. Yeah. So I just wanted really fast to show, if you have no time and you don't have any way to make bread, you might be able to. We have almost eaten this loaf. So this is sourdough bread from Aldi, and I don't know how many of you guys have an Aldi or a Trader Joe's or Whole Foods or any of those kind of stores. I've never checked any other store, but I'm guessing a lot of grocery stores have this. But how do you know if it's good sourdough bread compared to fake sourdough bread? That's just that I'm not going to say fake. It's a little bit like adding the discard. They would add some sourdough for the flavor and then call it sourdough bread, but it isn't going to do anything for your health. Yeah. So this one here, this is what you do. You look down at the ingredient label, and this ingredient label has wheat flour, water, sourdough culture, whole wheat flour, sea salt, malted barley flour, which is your sprouted grains that I was talking about, and enzymes. There is something missing from that label. Do you know what it is? There's no yeast in it. No. There's the culture, the sourdough culture, but there's no yeast. So like, she caught me off. I'm sorry. I didn't know where she was going. So this is a jar of yeast, like you would make any old regular bread. By the way, we forgot, this is the instant yeast. Yeah, instant. And that we get it from Amazon or Costco or Sam's, and we get a big thing of it, and it's a lot cheaper than if you go and buy those little individual packets at the store. Yeah. And once if you start making more bread, you'll want to go and do this because it's a lot cheaper. But this bread, what you put yeast in, when you make bread, it does not have time to have that slow rise. It does not give you it doesn't get rid of the enzyme inhibitors. It doesn't, it's just not as good for you. So if you don't have time to make the slow bread, whether you sprout it or make sourdough, then check. And if you can find some that's store-bought that does not have the word yeast in the ingredients, and if you actually know what all the ingredients are, like you could actually put those in your own kitchen and they're real, then I would go for it. And it's the real thing. So, you know, it's a cheater's method. As you can see in that, it didn't have any preservatives at all. So this, you get about, and this one here that we get, when we get it, has a date on it that says this is when it's going to go bad, and it goes bad. You better know. And if we think it's going to go close, we real quick stick it in the freezer to kind of survive until if we're not eating it as much or something like that. But, so if you guys have any questions, because I know we've covered a lot today. I know we're running out of time. Yes, and we're running out of time. People need to get back to their lives too. I would just like to invite you guys to send us an email. All of our websites have a contact button, and send us an email and ask. And we'd love to help. And maybe if we have enough of the same question, we could have another show. So that would be fine too. And as far as your children and teaching them, because life skills are part of what we're here. Did you want to say something? I was going to say, and if you have any other tips that you would like to share with us, do that, and we can pass them on to people also. We could put them right on that page with the resources. That'd be fun. So your children, you want them to learn life skills that you never got taught. Most of us as adults, we weren't taught this when we were growing up. No. So a couple resources, obviously the page that I keep telling you about that we've been linking, and I'll make sure we do it one more time. That's one option, but our PE curriculum has every Friday, or you could do it on any day you want to, but the 5th day of every week in our PE curriculum, we have links to websites where you can learn about nutrition and what are good foods and how do you prepare them in your kitchen, and then you've got a whole week to practice it. And that should be PE, right? That's better PE than what you get. And these are not what you're going to get
and from the mainstream media, these are things that we've researched over
Absolutely.
time and deal
Not
with things like
politically correct.
sourdough and fermenting
Yeah.
and lots of healthy things that have been done in the past but aren't done now. For instance, I was going to say this real quick, like with the sprouting of wheat, our grains and stuff today come so fast from the field to the processing that it is dried out and everything is like that is done and ground and it's in the bags and there's no fermenting allowed. Where historically they would sit it up in those little piles you see, and the rain would come down and the berries would begin to sprout while they were still on those stalks before they could get them in to be winnowed and pounded out. And so all their grain used to be sprouted because that just happened in the way the processing went. Nowadays, it doesn't happen. So our grain is totally different than even, say, 100 years ago.
Yeah, besides, never mind the hybridization and everything else that happened.
Yeah.
So, and we could go deep into that subject too, because that is super important.
Yes.
But we're going to have to save it. And so those are some resources that you can go to that you can learn about all of that. So I'm going to go off camera and get links to everybody in the chat.
So thank you all for being a part of this. And I hope that you've learned something. And we look forward to hearing your comments and being able to learn something from you all also. And we look forward to the next time being able to share with you. And look forward to seeing hopefully a lot of you in another month when we do our next webinar like this. Blessings and shalom.